Hello, and welcome to part two, where we're going to take what we learned about triggers and use that to interact with an NPC character and get him to talk to us with a little text box. So I'll see you on the other side. Hello, everybody. It's me, Levester, again, and today I'm going to show you how we can use what we learned last time about triggers and use that to have some type of interaction with an NPC or a non-playable character. So we're going to use this dialogue editor, which is free on the Unity Asset Store. I'm going to use this to have a conversation with, and like I said, an NPC character. So go ahead and grab this asset from the Asset Store. And then also I'm going to use a character from Mixamo. And Mixamo is a great place to get some free characters and free animations that you can use in your projects. So just go to, if you already have a character and some animation you want to use, then go ahead and do that. But I'm going to use some free stuff from Mixamo. So this is Mixamo. Like I said, they have a lot of characters and animations that you can use for your project. You can see they have a about three or four, yeah, 3 pages of characters that you can use. All this is commercial free, so you can use them for your project and your games for free. So I am going to grab a character. So let's go with, I'm gonna get a different character than what I have, just so we can see. I'm gonna get Alex here, and then say use this character. And then it's good practice to just download the T pose first, so you can see he's standing with his arms out. This is called a T pose. So it's good practice just to download this first. So just download him in a T pose and a stationary pose, because when we start adding animations to him, then it's going to, if we download it with the animation on him, then it's going to download in that default position. And if you want to use him for multiple um, things in your game, then that default position will be saved, and it might just look weird as developing. But T-pose here is pretty standard across the board, so just download the regular T-pose model first. So just hit download. And then go over to animations. And what we want is a sit animation. So you can grab this sit idle. We want the one where we have his hands on his knees. So sit idle here. This one might also work good depending on your end goal, but it might, when we transition to the other animation, it might look weird for that transition. So what I'm going to use is this sitting idle, and what you can do, just click download. And now since we already have our character in a T-pose, we're just going to go without skin and just hit download. And then there should be a sit to stand. See if I can find it quickly on this page. I don't see it, so in the search box, I'm gonna say sit stand, and this sit to standing is the other animation that we want. And just gonna download that, same thing without skin, and download that there. Now we have those 3 items there. We can go to our Unity project and finish setting this up. Here we are in Unity from our last scene with the spheres when we're working on the triggers. So we can use the same scene, or we can just start a new one. Since our XR origin's already set up here, we can just do it here as well and deactivate our cube here so it's not in our way. So what we're going to do first is get our items that we just got and put them in our project. First, I'm going to create a folder. Let's call it that. And then I'm just going to drag everything that I just downloaded and put that in this folder. All right, one thing about the Mixamo characters, or when you do bring characters and stuff into Unity, if I just try to drag him up, you can see he's just white now. But what I have to do is extract his materials and his textures. So if I click on his FBX file down in the asset folder, go to materials, I can click extract textures, and you can create a new folder. Well, I just do that, call a new folder called textures, just to be more organized. And then extracted materials, same thing, new folder, materials. And now you can see it automatically filled in his materials and things for him. If I click on his character in this game object, I can turn him around 180 there. And I can look at them. And since I extracted his materials, if I wanted to go in and edit it, I could. So if I want to change the way he looked, there we go. Add some color to him or something like that. Could look kind of shiny for some reason. If it's now normal map. All right, so now that I fixed this normal map and fixed his textures and everything, you should have got a pop-up box I got on my other screen that said to fix his textures and things like that. Just hit fix now and you should be good to go after you extracted those textures and materials. So now that I have him in here, make sure you also got the dialog manager package. Go to package manager if you just added it to your assets. So yeah, make sure you have the dialog editor. Make sure you imported that into your project as well. And let's continue to set this up. So to set up the dialog editor, we can go to the documentation. It comes with a good detailed documentation. So I go to dialog editor down here. You see it has this PDF file for the documentation. But to set this up, we need to put that on a canvas. So the best way to do that for what we want to achieve is to put a world space canvas onto our character. So let's right click on our character, go to UI, and we can actually, let's do an XR canvas so we can already have a everything set up for VR. So we want to go down to XR and then go to UI canvas down there. And this one's already set up to be a world space world space um, canvas, and also has this track device graphics raycast, which is needed and is used for our hands to detect the canvas here. So what I like to do is just bring this down so the height and the width to be 10 by 10, just so I can see it and better organize it. Still pretty big, so I just go 5 by 5, and that's good. And that's going to be invisible once we do things here. So what we need to do is just drag this in our dialog editor. There's a conversation manager. What we need to do is just drag that up to the canvas, and then we can scale that down. If we go over here to the hierarchy for this conversation manager, we can scale it down to about 0.002, I believe. And it can be a little bit bigger, 0.003. Yep, there we go. Then you can also see that it's backwards, so we can rotate it by 180. And let's move it up and in front of them. And if all this stuff is getting in your way, remember you can just turn off your gizmos right there. And we have our dialogue in there, our conversation um, manager in there. And this is where our conversation is going to be displayed. And all of this is customizable. If you look over the inspector, you can change the background image, change the option image, and just customize everything. Certain sounds you want to play here, you can add that in there as well. To set up our conversation that we want to have with him, what we need to do is right click over in the hierarchy and create an empty game object. And we can call this our NPC convo, just for conversation. And then we'll reset that position. It doesn't matter where it's at, but it's just good to not have random things in random locations. So what we need to do is just add a component here and start typing in NPC and add an NPC conversation. Now that this game object has this component on here for NPC conversation, what we need to do is go to Window and then click on Dialog Editor. And what that's going to open is this dialogue editor window. And this is where we can start typing in our conversations. So we can give our character a name. We'll call him David. And then we can type in our dialogue. So we can say, hello, my friend. Were you looking for me? You can say something, just put in something, anything you want. And the cool thing about this is you have your options you can go to. So here, since I asked a question, I can right click and I can say create speech. And I can just create another speech node here and just type in what I want them to say next. But since I asked a question, let me go ahead and delete that. I can ask for options. So I can right click and create an option. So over here, I can say the option here is yes. So yes, I was looking for you. And then create another option over here and say no. And then based off of that selection, I can tell them to say what I want them to say next. So for the speech over here, you can say no. Then David, he can say, well, that's too bad. And then over here, say David again. And for the dialogue, I'm going to say, great. Let's go get some food. And just whatever. And like I said, the cool thing about this, you can change the font here. So you got TMP fonts here. You can change. You want a certain sound to play once this is asked. So if you want like, hooray, you guys for some food or something like that, you can say you want some sound audio to play. Icon, if you want to put like a certain sprite there for his face or something, you can do that. And then for an event as well. So if you wanted some particle or something to play, you can add an event to this as well. So now that we have our conversation here all set up, we are ready to go back to Unity. We'll go back to the main editor. So I can just exit out of here now that that's all set up. If I double click on, well, not double click on it, but if I want to go back and edit it some more, just go back to Window, Dialog Editor, and make sure you have your conversation selected in the hierarchy. So if you have like 10 conversations over here, then just click on it and it's going to automatically pop up here in this window. Now that we have him set up, we need to do a couple more things here to set him up as a trigger. So if you remember before, what we had was a cube that served as our trigger area. So we pretty much need the same thing on him. So if we go back to our character, what we can do is on his main parent game object, we can just add a box collider here. So box collider. And let's turn our gizmos back on so we can actually see it. And then we can just set up where we want this to be at. So let's say any Y, we want it to be a 1. So you can see that's like 1 meter in front of them. So if us, the player, steps in this area here, then it's going to activate this box for us. And don't forget to set it as a trigger as well. Now we are ready to write our script. So here I can just add component and say, what is his name? David trigger, and create an ad. All right, here we are once again in our script. So let's set up the dialog editor in our script right quick. So I come up to the top. I'm going to be using a new library here. So I'm going to say using dialog editor. And then now what I'm going to do is say public conversation manager. Move that out of the way. Let's see what I'm spelling. Conversation manager. And then I'll just use what's recommended for the conversation managers. So I have a reference to the conversation manager. Then I need a reference to the actual conversation that I want to activate. So I'll say public NPC conversation, and I can call this David Convo. And then like last time, I need a reference to the player so we know when the player actually walks in this area. So public game object, and say player. Ah. So like before, we won't need the start and update here. But what we will need is the on trigger event. So let's say private on trigger enter. And like before, we're just going to say if other dot game object double equals player. And do you know why we have a double equals here in our if statement? Give you a second to ponder amongst yourself. And then we're going to access the conversation manager. So conversation manager dot start conversation. And we're going to say start David convo there. So this double equal sign is just a comparison tool. Was comparing the left side to the right side to match them, not really saying one object is equal to another one, like you would if you were doing like a float to change to something else. You would say this float equals 5 or something like that, but this is more of a comparison. So it's comparing the game objects to each other. So we have our conversation started. So this is what we're saying. If we walk into this area, then we want to start the conversation. And then let's also do our exit. So private void on trigger exit, and do the same thing. If other dot game object double equals player, then we want to say conversation manager again, dot end conversation, and just end the conversation there because you walked away from your friend David. All right, so here we have our setup for walking into this player area, saying if the other game object is a player, then start the conversation. If he leaves the area, then to end the conversation. So let's see what that looks like. So it's asking us for some references here. So let's set that up. So put in player for player, David conversation for NPC conversation, then the conversation manager or this conversation manager. Let's go ahead and move David back a little bit so we can actually walk to him. And then let's hit play. All right, so he's standing there. I walk up to him. There you go. David, hello, my friend. Are you looking for me? I can say yes. I can say no. That's too bad. I walk out, walk back up to him. It re-triggers that conversation. So we got that working. We walk up to him. It triggers that conversation. And he starts talking to us. Well, we get that pop-up box of acknowledgement. Then he asks us a question. So let's take it a step further and add an animation to him. So he's sitting down, and when we walk up to him, he stands up to greet us, and then when we walk away, he sits back down. So I'm going to go back to his folder here. We have his things, and we're going to first, what we need is an animated controller. So what I'm going to do is right-click on in the asset folder, go to create, and go to animated controller. And I'm going to call this David controller. And I'm going to double click on that to open up the animator. This is the animator, so this is where you're going to control all your animations and things. So what we're going to do here is drag these animations clips up into this animator. So I'm going to drag this first one just to sitting idle, so it's just sitting when we first get there. And then I'm going to drag in the sit to stand. I'm going to rename these. So this one, first one that's orange is sit idle. I'm going to call it sitting. And then the second one, I'm just going to call it stand up. So you might be asking, why is this orange? So this is orange because this is the first animation it's going to play. So as soon as the game starts, it's going to play him in this sitting animation. And what we're going to do in our code is switch over to the stand up animation. And while we're here to sit back down, all we have to do is duplicate this. So if I highlight this, you can see it's highlighted by the blue outline. I can just duplicate this and I can rename this sit down. And pretty much I'm going to just play this backwards. So I can just go down to the speed and say -1, and that's going to play it backwards. So what we're going to do in our code is have him, when we walk into the space, it's going to have him stand up. And then when we walk out of the space, it's going to sit down. And then to transition back to just sitting, what I'm going to do is right click here, make a transition, and go back to sitting. So he's just sitting idle. And one last thing, if I double click on sitting and scroll down in the inspector, there's a loop. So I'm hit loop time and loop pose just so he doesn't stop sitting. Well, not will stop sitting, but his motion is going to freeze. So once the animation is done playing, if I don't loop it, then he's just going to look like he's just frozen there instead of like fiddling around like it showed when we looked at Mixamo. So now that we have this stand up and sit down animator set up, what we want to do is go to our character, back to our character. Let's give him his name, David. And then we're going to add an animator. And then inside for us asking for a controller, we're going to add that animator controller there for David. So now let's go back to our script and set this up. All right, so here we are back in our script. The first thing we're going to need is a reference to our animator. So let's say public animator. We can call it David Anim, short for David's animator. That's all we need there. So now in our conversation, in our on trigger enter, all we have to do is say David Anim dot play, and we need the name. I'm going to put double quotes, and we just got to name the animation. We got to put in the name of the animation that we want to play. So we can just say stand up. Not with a zero there. Sorry. There we go. And we got to make sure it is spelled exactly the same. So I'm just going to pop back over to Unity, and you can see I have stand up with a lowercase u. I'm just change this over here to stand up there, just so it's camel case and all that good stuff. So stand up. You can see it changed there, and then the other one is sit down. So down here, I'm just going to say David Anim.play. Sit down. Save that there, and we're going to head back to Unity. All right, now that we're back in Unity, I'm going to click on David, and now his David Anim is looking for an animator. I can just grab this animator and put that in the box there. And now all I have to do, that should be all the setup we need. We should be able to just hop in now, hit play, and see him sitting. So let's get this test run. A little off, but it's doing what we want it to do. Walk away, it sits down. Yes. And there we have it. The box was a little close to him, but we can make that quick adjustments to move it further away wherever you want it. But you saw that he stood up. If we take this conversation manager and just move it forward a little bit, then that's all good. But you saw, if we got close to him, he stood up and talked to us, greeted us, and we got able to talk to him. So that is how we can use those triggers to make these actions happen. So I hope you enjoy that. If you want to know anything else about Unity or have any questions, just let me know. Like, comment, subscribe for more tutorials, and do all that good stuff. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will talk to you all next time. Thank you. Bye.